Hey dudes, my name's Blako. Recently, Blackthornprod released their 6 devs make a game without communicating Godot edition video, which I got to be a part of, and so I kinda just wanted to revisit the project and talk about some of the challenges and backstory with working on the game. First of all, this was the first Blackthornprod challenge that I was a part of, and I submitted my part for the game back in the beginning of January 2025. I got this project on January 5th, and the final result was submitted on January 7th, so it was basically a game jam. And while I've done the occasional game jam before, this was definitely a lot more difficult, partly because of the first challenge, starting with an unfamiliar project. Every game developer likes to set up their projects differently, and so opening up this one, the way it's laid out is that it has all the scenes under a scene folder and all the scripts under a script folder. I've seen this done before, and I think it's pretty common in other game engines, but for whatever reason in Godot, when it's set up like this, it whizzes out my brain and I have a much harder time pairing up how everything works in the game. Normally I keep the scripts next to their scene, and one of the main reasons is for portability, so that I can reuse things in other games easily by just copying the one folder they're in. But the main reason is just that I can easily see what scenes have scripts tied to them. Anyway, I know that's just a me problem and a skill issue, but with limited time, it was a challenge just to initially figure things out and to work on any new features. Next up was the main character. When I first saw the main character, I thought it was really interesting because it used a technique that I had never seen before, at least in Godot, where it's a 3D character but it gets rendered to a 2D sprite using a viewport. I've seen a similar style be made where a 3D character gets rendered out into a 2D sprite sheet, but this one does it in real time, which was pretty neat. While it was really neat, it became a big challenge because the world was a 2D world instead of a 3D one, so if I wanted to add characters like other enemies or a boss, I'd have to make a 3D model and use the same technique for it to match the style by setting up viewports and rendering them to sprites. So for a game jam like this, I kinda wish the character and the world matched. Like if the game was instead a 3D world, and more of a 2.5D style, then I could just model up some 3D assets and throw them into the world, or if the game was all 2D, then I could just make some more 2D art for the game. Either way, the character was cool, and I've definitely ripped off the rendering technique for some other projects I've worked on, so shout out to Meh Studios. The next challenge was the biggest challenge, at least for me, being the last developer. Before doing this project, I had actually never seen one of these challenges before, so when I got asked to be a part of the project, I watched a few of the previous videos, and some of the things that stuck out to me was that sometimes people would completely overwrite stuff a previous developer did. I can kind of understand doing this, just because it is always easier to start from scratch than to work on something that was previously made, and that's true not just in game development, but in normal software as well. Another thing that stuck out is the big obvious one, where whatever state the last developer left the game in is the final state for the game. This kinda drove everything that I added or changed with the game, because when I got this project, the character movement felt great, but overall the game had a lot of beginnings for things, like the beginning of a combat system, the beginning of some menus, the beginning of collecting star things. It seemed like a lot of things were started but never completed. It did have 3 levels though, and I felt like that was enough for a game jam type game. I really wanted to add a final boss and a bunch of other stuff, but a boss would have probably taken all my time, so I decided to just add a bunch of smaller updates to the game and give it an ending. I probably spent too much time making music for the game and adding a bunch of sound effects to all the UIs, and just a bunch of small updates that took up a lot of time. But if you played the original version, I feel like it definitely spiced things up. And I know the dialogue was controversial just because it could slow the game down, and people either liked the portraits or absolutely hated them, and then others didn't like that there was an ending, which is totally valid, but it is what it is. I had fun overall doing this type of challenge. Shout out to Blackthornprod for putting it together, and all the developers that took part. Anyway, that's all I got. See ya dudes!